Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Capitol View, a webcast that we have each Monday produced by the Daily Journal and djournal.com, where we look at what's going on in the state legislature. Bobby Harrison with us again, as usual, the Capitol Bureau Chief for the Journal. He's down there in Jackson. Bobby, how are you doing?
All right, Brad, how you doing?
Can't complain, man. We've got a couple of important bills I want to discuss here. One of them is a House bill, I believe it's number 1523. The same-sex objection bill is I guess what a lot of people are calling it. Essentially, what it does is it's being framed by the authors as a bill that protects the religious expression of those who object to same-sex marriage, in particular circuit clerks, for instance, who don't want to issue a same-sex marriage license, I guess. But obviously, Bobby, there's been a lot of strong reaction against it down there, hadn't it? And everywhere around the state.
It's gotten a lot of national attention, Brad. And it's interesting that several large companies have come out against the bill, such as Nissan, and this weekend the Mississippi Economic Council, which is the state's Chamber of Commerce, took a position against the bill. It's called it's got a long title: "The Protecting Freedom of Conscience from Government Discrimination Act" is actually the name of the bill. Maybe it's not as catchy as just religious freedom or religious objection, but essentially what the bill does is the supporters of the bill says it doesn't discriminate against those same-sex couples who now have a constitutional right to get married after the U.S. Supreme Court ruling last summer. But take a circuit clerk, for instance. They could file an official recusal letter and file that letter, and they would not be obligated to provide a marriage license to a same-sex couple. Now, the supporters of the bills say that the same-sex couple would still have a right to get a marriage license in a timely, quick fashion, if you will. But it's not clear, at least at this point, it's not clear exactly how that would occur if, say, you were in a small county where all the people in the circuit clerk's office have filed a letter saying they had a religious objection to issuing that marriage license to a gay couple. It's not sure how the gay couple would get the marriage license in a timely fashion at that point. That's something that could be litigated in courts if this bill does become law.
You mentioned the Supreme Court ruling. The Supreme Court of the United States, of course, last year approved gay marriage. Now, this doesn't necessarily outlaw gay marriage by any means. This bill, but still, it would seem to maybe in some ways to run up against that ruling, wouldn't it?
Right, I mean, the opponents of the bill say the practical effect of the bill would be that it would be more difficult for a same-sex couple to get a marriage license, for instance, than people entering into a traditional marriage. And that's their objection. They say it does put gay people in a different class, in which would make it harder for them to get a marriage license. So that's why they say it's unconstitutional and puts Mississippi in a bad light. Brad, the bill also has other provisions in it too. Everybody would focus on the clerks, and I think that's where the practical effect could be. But the bill also, for instance, a restaurant could have a religious objection to hosting a wedding reception for a gay couple, and they wouldn't have to host that wedding reception. Now, the opponents of the bill says that's kind of a false. That's not even something that matters in Mississippi, because Mississippi law already does not provide protection of a business owner is not prohibited from denying service under Mississippi law. Now, it may run up against some federal law, but as far as state law, there's no law saying that a business owner has to provide service to any group of people or any type of people.
Right. So that's kind of a moot point as far as that goes.
Right. But that's part of the bill, and that's kind of it's kind of got some people worked up that and they also, in the bill, also includes religious leaders or churches that say that the church doesn't have to perform a gay marriage. Now, practically, the U.S. Constitution will protect a church from having to perform a gay marriage if a church so chose not to do so under freedom of religion. So it's got some aspects of the bill that it gets people worked up, but it actually doesn't have a practical effect.
You mentioned, Bobby, some businesses have reacted to this bill, like Toyota and Nissan, and some people have obviously, a lot of people have spoken out against it very strongly. And if you look at this, the potential fallout for this, Bobby, for a state that's already struggling with, revenue collections and just financially in general, this is something that could have an economic impact if it passes, could it not?
Well, I mean, you look at it, to certain circles, people say we get a bomb reputation because we're the only state that has the Confederate battle emblem as a prominent part of our official state flag. So that's another sort of negative perception that some people have in Mississippi. And then on top of that, some people are complaining that that this is Governor Bryant proclaimed this Confederate History Month, Confederate Memorial Month. So, we just in certain circles, we just kind of get there's a lot of things officials do that some would argue helps to create a negative image of Mississippi.
So what's next for this bill, Bobby?
Well, it originated in the House and it passed the House several weeks ago, and it went to the Senate where the Senate made a change to it, sent it back to the House, and last Friday the House concurred in those changes by a 69 to 44 vote. But it was held on a motion to reconsider, meaning that sometimes this week, maybe as early today, unless something dramatic happens, the House leadership will make a motion to table that motion to reconsider. And based on last Friday's vote, the motion to table will prevail, and then it'll be sent to the governor, who has not yet said whether he's going to sign it or not. But most people believe he will.
All right, we'll keep track of that, certainly, Bobby. Another bill I wanted to talk about has to do with special education vouchers. That's been a bit of a hot topic this session as well. There's a proposal out there that would make it easier for students who are not currently in public schools to receive the voucher scholarship money, which I believe is $6,500 a year. Now, they've already got a program like this in place. What does this do to upgrade that or what have you?
Well, the program was put in place in legislation sponsored or authored last year by former State Senator Nancy Collins of Tupelo. She was a big proponent of this bill that would allow special education students to receive a $6,500 voucher or scholarship to leave the public schools and pursue private education options if they were not happy with the education they were receiving in the public schools. Now, the bill for the first year only applied for about 450 students, and only about 330 were entered the program. And some people felt that the bill had to be expanded to allow more kids to enter the special ed voucher program. And this is what this bill does. Under the what was passed last year, you had to had what you call an individual education plan within the past 18 months, and you have to be in the public schools to get those IEPs. And so this bill that's pending in the House now, the House concurs, it would go to the governor. It would allow a student to have had an IEP within the past 5 years. So it would make it easier for a student in the private schools to be able, who had been in the public schools at one time but had been out of the private schools for several years, to be able to apply for and receive these special ed vouchers.
Hod Bryant of Amory, Democrat, as many Democrats do, objects to this bill, and kind of, I guess, he voiced one of the central arguments that you always hear when it comes to vouchers is it's sending state money, public money, to private schools. I'm assuming that's the central objection here too.
Yeah, and this is a little bit different, because this would be sending state money to private schools to help pay for a student that was no longer in a public school but was already attending a private school.
Right.
That's a little bit different than other voucher proposals that would allow a student in the public schools to take the money and go to a private school. Under this proposal, most likely the student would already be in the private school when he received the money to help him with his private school education.
All right, Bobby, let's look ahead. We've got a lot ahead of you this week, I'm sure. What are we kind of looking to happen down there in Jackson?
Well, tomorrow is the deadline to pass revenue or appropriations bills from the that originated in the other chamber. Now, what is pending? Well, two things are pending: a possible tax increase to improve for infrastructure, to improve the roads and bridges in the state. That is most likely going to die without any action being taken in the House. But the House the House Ways and Means Committee is going to meet in less than an hour, and they're likely to pass out some type of tax cut. The Senate's already passed a tax cut that would be about $575 million spread out over 15 years. The proposal the Senate passed earlier this year would have about a $20 million impact on the state budget for this coming budget year, at a time when state revenues are really struggling and are down, and more cuts are possible. Now, the House it's not clear what the House Ways and Means Committee is going to pass out or try to pass out this afternoon, but it's likely they're going to try to pass some type of tax cut out this afternoon that would have to be voted on by tomorrow, on Tuesday. So that's the main thing to watch this week.
All right, Bobby, let's do the three things we do every week.
Brad, and then the religious objection to the gay marriage bill. Most likely the motion to table will happen this week too.
Okay. All right, three things, Bobby. Let's go to we do most impactful legislation, most impactful lawmaker, and strangest occurrence of the week. So we'll start with most impactful legislation.
Well, I think it's obvious. The religious objection bill is is the main focus down here this week. It's getting all the attention, so that's kind of an easy one. I guess the other one would be the fact that it appears that the legislation, the most impactful legislation, may be the legislation that dies, which would be the legislation to improve the state's roads and bridges. There was a lot of focus put on that before the session began, that something needed to be done. There's been several studies talking about the state having a number of deficient bridges, and the roads are getting in poor shape. But it appears that most likely that nothing major will occur on that front here.
Most impactful lawmaker of this past week.
Well, the Jennifer Brannon, Branning, she's a freshman senator, Republican senator from Philadelphia, and has been pretty quiet this session, like most freshmen often are. But she was selected by the leadership to present the gay marriage bill on the Senate floor, to explain it and kind of be the face of that bill. And whatever you think about the politics of it, she proved herself to be very capable, and she understood the legal aspects of the bill.
Seem to have lost Bobby there. So we'll try to get him back here on Capitol View. Thanks for tuning in. We were just about to wrap things up too, but looks like we got a bad connection down there. There we go. You back, Bobby?
Yeah, I'm there. Where did you lose me?
You were talking about how Ms. Branning understood the legal aspect of things.
Yeah, she was, as I was saying, she was selected by the leadership to handle the bill on the Senate floor, which is on a bill like that. That's kind of it's a very controversial bill, and it's also dealing with several touchy legal issues. She's a Philadelphia attorney, which but she proved to be very capable. As I said, even regardless of what you thought of her politics or what you thought about the bill, she just did a good job of handling the bill on the Senate floor, I thought.
All right, and finally, Bobby, the strangest occurrence down there in Jackson this week.
Well, I'm going to kind of cheat, Brad. I'm going to go back actually 2 weeks, and it didn't get enough attention at the time. But on deadline day to pass bills out of committee in the Senate 2 weeks ago, the Senate Judiciary Committee met early that morning and didn't take up the religious objections to gay marriage bill. And did not schedule a meeting for later on in the day. So most people thought that bill was going to die then and there in the Senate committee on deadline day. But the Senate had met about 4 o'clock that deadline day, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, where Senate Judiciary A Chair Sean Tindall from down on the coast, a Republican, called another meeting of Judiciary A where he did take that legislation up. If he hadn't have done that, that bill would have died on deadline day in the committee. But he took it up about 5 o'clock on deadline day, and so it's kind of unusual for the committee to have met in the morning and wasn't planning to meet again, and that bill was going to die. And then at the last minute, for whatever reasons, it was revived, and here we are now.
All right, good stuff there, Bobby. And thanks again to everybody tuning in here to Capitol View. If you missed any of it or just want to watch it again, we'll have the replay available at djournal.com. And I'll upload the audio in a little while to my blog, tipsheet.djournal.com, if you just want to listen there. Be sure to catch Bobby on today's episode of the Memo podcast. That should be available soon on iTunes, your podcast app, or memo.djournal.com. And be sure to follow Bobby on Twitter at BobbyHarrison9. I'm on Twitter at Bradlock. All right, we'll do this again next Monday. Until then, Bobby, thanks for joining us, man.
All right, Brad, enjoyed it.
See you next time.
You bet. Bye-bye.